Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the latest edition of the Jacob Elyachar Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Elyachar, the chief content producer and writer of jakestake.com, a pop culture entertainment news website. If you're watching this today, please give us a thumbs up and please subscribe to my channel. If you're listening to this to any of our audio platforms, please give me a 5-star rating, download this episode, and more episodes, please. I'm very excited to welcome this podcast coach and content creator today. He's the host of the Berardo Podcast, and as of this recording, he has 48,800 Instagram followers. Please help me welcome Tony Berardo to the podcast.
Hey, Jacob, thanks for having me, man.
It's the best. You're so welcome, Tony. And I got to say, I have to return a favor because you had me on your podcast, my friend.
That's right, buddy, which will be live shortly. I'm just a little behind with a newborn. It's been a little crazy. But we're going to get that thing up and running. But that was a good time. So we'll get that up and running.
It was a wonderful time. Congratulations on your becoming a father.
Thank you. Thank you.
All righty. So I would love to learn your podcasting origin story.
Oof. How much time do we have? No, I'm just kidding.
We have a lot.
I'll give the grassroots. So originally I started a blog. Which if anybody out there doesn't know, that's all a podcast is. It's just an audio blog, from like a website, perspective. So like when you have a website, whether it's Squarespace or Wix, or you just GoDaddy, whatever website domain that you own, you can have a podcast. It's very simple to start one. It's a little bit complex if you dig a little bit deep in it. But me, when I started a blog originally, I mainly did it to kind of like journal. Like my goals, things I wanted to do, things I learned, books I read, reviews on tech and gear. So it was kind of like all over the place. Didn't really have a structure. It was just kind of my way to dump everything that was in my brain. And then I started working at a big multi-billion-dollar company in the marketing department, where I was involved a lot more with content, athletes, negotiating brand deals. This company is called Monster Energy. I was there. Some of you may have heard of him, but I was there for about a decade. And during that time, I realized I had like a lot of other stuff I was good at, i.e., dealing with athletes, negotiating these big deals, capturing really cool footage, social media. Like I started kind of dipping a lot more in that space, and I was like, you can't really like translate that on the written form. Like it doesn't come off good in a blog post. If I was to say like, hey, this is the best way to use Instagram, it just doesn't, at least for me anyway. I'm more of a visual person, right? That's how I learn. So I was like, I should start a podcast. And it also really helped me and my wife at the time. She was my fiance, because I would just talk to her about a bunch of stuff she doesn't know about. And she's like, can you just stop? I don't know anything. Just start a podcast. I don't want to hear this anymore. I was like, okay. So then my podcast became just me talking into a mic by myself. Again, kind of like putting thoughts to paper, quote unquote. But in this case, instead of the blog form, it was the audio form of a podcast. And people started digging it. So I just called it the Berardo Podcast because that's my social media handles and has been for a while. And also my website is at theberardo.com. So I just kind of wanted to keep the brand in that realm. And I was like, instead of like social media marketing, let me dip a little bit more into health, which is what I'm passionate about, and wellness and the creator economy. So I started interviewing a lot of other creators and a lot of other podcasters. And, here we are almost 3 years later, about 2.5 years. And I'm 220 with Jacob's episode. I'm going to edit and post. That's 221 episodes. And it's been great. It's now kind of evolved into a video form, where I also get a lot of people that, come to me for coaching if they want to start their podcast or edit their video clips. Because, now with TikTok and Instagram, the vertical content is very popular now. So I edit a lot of those vertical clips for my clients and just kind of help people get up and running if they want to get good at social media or podcasting. So that's kind of my business on the side that I do, aside from my personal podcast. And yeah, just, we're all ready to rock and roll for 2024. I got some big plans, and my YouTube channel continues to grow. So it's exciting. It's been kind of a long journey to get here. And as you know, with a podcast, monetarily, there's really no benefit up front. So I'm starting to see a little bit more monetization, which is fun. But that took 3 years. But it mainly just started as a passion. I'm sure, Jacob, like you and I've talked about, that the reason you started this was it's a way to communicate in the long form, which I love. And I've just always been a fan of talking to people, that I don't know, which is fascinating to me because you don't know where the conversation is going to go. I like that aspect of podcasting. But then B, which is probably the most important thing, is there's so much cool shit going. Can I curse on here, by the way?
I can, but I'm going to have to give it an explicit rating.
As of course I asked that, I think I've cursed 3 times already. But for me, there's so much cool stuff going on. I.e. social media and, AI and all that. And I'm like, I just want to learn a little bit of everything. And I feel like the podcast is a great way to do it because then you could connect with people that know about that stuff. You talk to them, you learn. So it's kind of like a really fun way, instead of like reading a book, I'm talking with people. And I just had some really great conversations and met some really great people. Some of my best friends that I call really good friends, I haven't even met yet. I met them on the podcast virtually. And, that was years ago, and we're still really good friends. And I've never even met them. So it's amazing what this medium can do. So
it is. And by the way, we met each other on Threads, which is amazing. And
that's right.
Not to mention, I got to say this, I got to meet a lot of my people that I'm friends with on podcasts and still keep in touch with them on social media. So like I get to see their faces once in a while, but not like in person.
Yeah, it's crazy. That's crazy.
It is. And by the way, Monster Energy, that is just insane. Talk about one of the most important energy companies of all time.
Yeah, beverage companies now. I mean, they've dipped into, they're in the isotonic space, which is kind of enhanced water. And they even have water that they sell. It's called Tour water, kind of like a Liquid Death. And then they, have beer and hard seltzer and hard teas now. So they're definitely expanding. It was a fun ride. I learned a ton. I started off kind of like, merchandising, delivering cases and selling cases of Monster to stores. And then within the decade, I got promoted a couple times to regional manager. And then I dipped into the marketing department, which was kind of where I found my passion. And I was there for quite some time. And that was great. It was cool to be a part of something so like fun and creative. Unfortunately, we had some differences, which is why they quote unquote had to let me go. And it was actually, funny enough, it was because of the podcast. Would you like to hear that story?
Wow, that is very fascinating.
I'll let people kind of like look on my own YouTube because I did a whole video on it. I don't hate them because they did me a favor, but they told me I can only talk about certain brands on my podcast, and I was like, no, we're not playing that game. The reason I started this podcast is to say whatever the hell I want. So I don't care how much you're paying me or not. It's not, you're not going to pigeonhole me into that. So that was kind of our creative differences there.
I got to say, kudos to you for saying I am not getting pigeonholed. Yeah. I know it must be rough, but at the same time, I don't like when I'm pigeonholed either. So it's better for us to be, as podcasters, that we can talk all what we love and not have any differences. Like, I'd rather be able to talk about what I want to talk about and just be like muzzled.
That's right. 100%. And again, we go back to, there's so much cool stuff out there. It's like, you shouldn't, if you're a company or if you're a human being, you shouldn't focus just on one thing. There's so many cool things out there, and you don't know what you're going to love until you try it. So you shouldn't be with a company or a person, if you're in a relationship. I'm no expert, obviously, but if you're in a relationship and that person doesn't like what you do, that's a problem. You either find something new or you find a new person. You have to, you got to take care of yourself first and foremost. So that was kind of a turning point in my life. And they did me a favor because, now my content business is doing better than what I was doing at Monster. And I work from home, by the way. So now I'm a stay-at-home dad that has a content business at home. Like, it's pretty cool. So.
And by the way, you're going to be the coolest stay-at-home dad ever.
That's the goal. I'm gonna try.
Alrighty. So, in addition to being pigeonholed and just like that, or like what are some of the other challenges that you face that you're staying in our industry, and how are you able to overcome those obstacles?
I'd probably say the big thing is, finding guests was always a challenge and still is. As you know, it's tough. I mean, we met on Threads, and that's only because like I'm really enjoying Threads and the engagement. People seem to be excited about that community thus far. Kind of, it's the new thing. So I just would shoot out typically DMs to people that I find interesting. Out of 100 people, 10 people say they want to come on the show. So it's a lot of kind of time that you spend finding guests and finding people that you feel your audience would really kind of resonate with. Because I think that's the challenge with podcasts. I forget the number, but I think there's something close to like 2 million podcasts currently right now in Apple's platforms. And that's a lot of podcasts. So what's going to make your podcast different? I think the answer is finding something cool that people resonate with. And you might not be able to do that every week or every month or however often you put out your podcast. So I tried to find like every single episode something that wasn't just interesting to me, but also would be interesting to my listener. And that is a challenge, right? So I'm DMing people and the rejection you're getting. And by the way, all this work you're doing, you're not getting paid, right? It's just a hobby that we're doing here as podcasters. I do have a couple sponsorship and brand deals, but that's not a guarantee. So I don't rely on that. That's just kind of like extra incremental money that I make. So for me, it was like, I'm doing all this work. I'm not really getting anything out of it. And then you look at the viewership count and you're like, people are listening this week, but they're not listening next week. And it's like, and then you start overanalyzing. So I think the beginning of my journey was a challenge because you're putting in all that work and not getting an ROI from it. But then once I forgot about that stuff, that's how I overcame it. Is I didn't look at the numbers. I still don't look at the numbers anymore. I don't look how many downloads I have. I don't look how many subscribers I have. I don't look at any of that. I just put out content that I find cool. And if people dig it, people dig it. Like it's what I call post and ghost. So I engage with the community. So if someone leaves a comment, I try to engage back. I stitch videos. I give shout outs on my podcast for people that follow me. Like just the other day, I put out a thread of like, what questions do you want answered on my podcast I'm recording this week? I had a bunch of questions. So I actually responded to them and said, hey, I gave you a shout out on my episode 220. Go take a listen to it. And they're like, oh my God, that's so cool. So I try to engage with my listeners, but I don't overanalyze my podcast. It's just I post it and I forget about it. It's a fun hobby I like to do, similar to working out or brushing my teeth. It's just a part of my routine. And I don't listen to other people. If they tell me they don't like it, okay, great. I like it. It's, so I accept feedback, of course, but I'm doing it because I enjoy doing it. And that's kind of how I overcame that challenge is I'm not in this thing to make money. If I never make money, I'm happy with it because I just like doing it.
I gotta say, that's the reason why I love doing podcasts too, is because I love talking with people, and there's so many incredible conversations that you can have. And I gotta say, like, I give you kudos a lot, Tony, because the thing is, I was looking back at some of your old episodes, and you were able to go on for at least 40 to 45 minutes. And like for me, solo, that for me, I'm a writer, and it's the only time I go solo is when I do the best of the year episode. So I feel extremely uncomfortable and vulnerable. But like, I gotta give you kudos for doing solo.
Thanks. Yeah, those usually would be a challenge, but I've spent, I don't know, close to 20, I'm 38 now, so close to 15, 16 years of managing people. So all I did was, I used to speak before Monster Energy, I worked at Coca-Cola. So I would speak in front of hundreds of people at a time. And when I would manage people, I had, 20, 30 direct reports. And I had to do these big conferences. And so I'm always been, I think, good improvising and taking one topic and just kind of being able to make it more open-ended. By that, I mean, like, you and I can have a conversation about 5 things that I know, but I could drag it out for 3 hours because I like to make things open-ended to where it's not so matter of fact. It's more objective. It's more, let me hear your side of things. What do you think about this? That to me has always been the most exciting and intriguing podcast, is where it's more objective and not so like one-sided, and that's kind of why I think I'm able to do those solo podcasts, is because when I take a topic, let's say it's, health and wellness, eating right, for example, or something, it's never like my diet. It's, this is what I used to do. This is the current studies right now that have worked. These are some examples. These are other people. So there's many layers to that one specific podcast. I think a lot of people, when they try to do solo podcasts, they just try to, do in the perspective of themselves. And everyone's so different. So I don't know about you, but if I was listening to a podcast that was 40 minutes about just one guy ranting, it's kind of like, I don't need to see that. It's like the Kardashians. Like, would you watch the Kardashians if it was just only Kim? Probably not. Right? It's like, it's the dynamic, it's the drama, it's the different stories, it's the transitions of the storylines. It's all that stuff combined that makes kind of a very popular and successful show. So
all I gotta say is I'd rather watch America's Got Talent or The Masked Singer than the Kardashians.
Hey, I agree. I'm not a fan. My wife watches that new one that's on Hulu, and every time I go downstairs, I have to see it in the background, so it drives me crazy. But
I know. Anyway, we're not here to talk about the Kardashians. We're here to talk about you, my friend. So,
thank you.
Who were your most memorable guests, and why did they stand out?
Ooh, good question. I have had Dr. Michael Greger on my podcast, which, if you guys don't know, you could check that out. He wrote the book called How Not to Die. Very popular book. I forget his social media handles. It's escaping me right now. But Greger is Greger, Dr. Michael Greger. And that was an interesting podcast episode for a lot of reasons. Number one, he was on his walking treadmill the whole time. So that was interesting. And I've never had a guest do that before. And it was actually one of my first podcast episodes. I think it was like episode 30 or something, or maybe 40. And I did it via Zoom. I've updated my process here in 2024. But I thought that was interesting for a lot of reasons. A, because of the guests. It was talking a lot about health and wellness and things that I didn't even know. And I was kind of looking for different ways to better my life. I have Crohn's disease, and I was diagnosed just a few years ago. And I used to eat a lot and kind of treat my body like an amusement park. And I think my body was like, oh, okay, you going to do this? All right, we're going to give you Crohn's, buddy. So I've been finding ways to literally try to find a cure, and there is no cure, but I think I'm at the point now where I'm in remission, to where I don't want to say I cured it, because I'm still going to have issues, but I'm always finding new ways to be more healthy and get better and deal with this disease, because millions of people deal with it on a daily basis, and it's different for every single person. And he really gave me a lot of insight on what I could do. Eating a plant-based lifestyle was one of the things that he kind of preached to me a little bit, and that's what his whole book's about. So that was really eye-opening for me. I learned a lot from that, and I was not good at podcasting, I don't think, then. I'm embarrassed when I go back and look at some of the other episodes, but I thought that was cool, because not only does he have millions of followers, but it was episode 30 or 40, whatever it was, but I reached out in the DM. And that is the other reason why that was one of my favorite episodes. It wasn't my best. I didn't like it personally, like me as the interviewer, but the fact that I was able to get that via DM, and the dude came out with another book, again, millions of followers, I thought that was really cool. So that to me kind of stands out, because a lot of the other podcasts are just like, it's too hard to pick because they're so good. There's some by Heather Parody, which I really enjoyed. She has a big following on social media. Amadeo, which is one of my buddies that is from Italy, and he is now here in the US. We had a really good episode. That probably stands out the most. But in terms of like a shock to me, it would be that episode. I feel like Dr. Michael Greger. So, but
I've
it's hard to
never
pick. I
heard
had
of
so
a
many great ones.
guest that has done a treadmill. That you
I
were
know.
that was walking on a treadmill while we were recording a podcast. Did he? I bet he found something fine, but like I never thought of. I don't think I would be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I have a walking treadmill. It's not easy to do things and also, especially be on video. But he did it well. He's very, he's in shape. He's not like jacked or anything. He's just a really healthy older gentleman. So yeah, that was interesting. But that one stands out to me for sure because that is a challenge. And those are my only ones still to the day. 220 episodes in, no one else has been on a treadmill. So it's like he holds that title. That's pretty cool.
Awesome. So let's talk about who are your dream guests, Tony?
Ooh, man. I would love to interview, and I'm not ignorant because I'm putting this out there where like 2026 is when I'm worthy, I think, of this. But maybe like Andrew Huberman, Jay Shetty, these type of guys, I think would be really interesting to have on the show. But more so, I don't know if I would want to interview these guys. I'd rather be on someone else's podcast, and like my dream podcast would be like a Joe Rogan. Mainly because like I don't really follow everything that he does, nor do I believe in it. But I think that's the platform that you want to get on. Like you want to sit down and talk with that guy, whether you like him or not. He's got the number one show in the world. So to be on that show and to learn from him, it's like if you want to be good at basketball, you gotta go check out LeBron James. You got to play with him, right? Like, I mean, you want to know pop music, you got to hang out with MJ. Like there's certain Mac Daddies.
Absolutely. If you want to talk about country music, Dolly Parton. If you want to go into talk shows, Rosie O'Donnell and Oprah.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. And if you want to know how to make millions of dollars on a movie, you go hang out with The Rock. Like there's certain folks that you want to be around. But I think like in a perfect world, I like to say, "Ooh, I'd love to interview The Rock, and I would love to interview the." But it's like, I don't know. I can't put myself in those shoes yet because I just don't think I'm there yet. I don't have the value to bring those guests yet, and that's why I say in 2026 I think I'll be there. But I would love to be on like Joe Rogan's podcast one day and just learn from that dude.
Very interesting because Joe is polarizing, but also he is probably one of the masters of podcasting. Yeah. And I think it'd be very interesting to see to learn how he guides, especially 3 hours, which is like, oh boy.
That's a long time, man. And, they don't edit, right? Like, they don't really cut anything. Like, if you watch it on YouTube, which I typically do, there's no cuts. So my big question is, when do they go pee? Because you hear about him occasionally, like, take a pee break. Like, he'll say it. He'll be like, hey, should we take a pee break? And then they cut and then go right back. So that's when they cut. But I don't know, man. Like, I can't go more than like an hour and a half. So I don't know if they're not staying hydrated enough, but 3 hours is a long time to just sit down and talk with somebody. I think I could do it with Joe because it would see a guy like that would be interesting because I would learn from him. Like, not necessarily what we record, but like just going into his studio, seeing the layout, seeing his space, because there's only so much stuff you can look on Google. Right? Like you can Google Joe Rogan's podcast setup, but he has that thing on such lockdown that it's very hard to figure out what cameras he uses, what his producer does. Like, I want to know all that behind the scenes stuff. And then like how he does brand deals. And I want to work out with him before the podcast. Like I just want to hang out with him. I think that'd be cool.
I think it'd be very interesting to see if you do that, Tony, you got to come back on my podcast to tell me all about it, unless he signs an NDA.
For sure. Yes, you'll be the first to know for sure, unless it's
Wonderful.
an NDA.
Like being long, I believe one of my longest podcasts I ever recorded was with my friend Owen Likes Comics. We talked a lot about modern day comic books. So, do you have the longest story podcast that you were ever recorded?
Ooh, yeah. First of all, love comics. I used to be a huge nerd. And you can't really see it in my space, but I'm a huge Batman fan, so I have like Batman stuff. Are you a Batman fan?
Yes.
Oh, dude. Wow. Okay. Well, first of all, let's forget about my guest for a second. Let's talk about that for a couple seconds.
Okay.
So I had this debate with my buddy who's also a Batman nut. I go to every single Batman movie with him. Like the last one, obviously, we saw The Flash, which isn't a Batman movie, but it kind of is.
Yeah.
So what do you think between, because here's a big debate to me, is what's the better Batman movie, The Dark Knight or The Batman? The Matt Reeves Batman.
This is a tough one. They got it. And if you're looking at performances, Heath Ledger's Joker, probably the best comic book villain ever. Well, probably, and he only went to ever receive an Oscar win before Joaquin Phoenix Joker. So that's one thing. And then if you're looking on like stylization or like how close in depth to the comics you're going to get, I would say the Batman, because I've seen No Man's Land. I see Zero City. He's Scott Snyder's, who, by the way, I've met Scott and Greg multiple times. Very nice people. So very nice creators. Some of my favorite creators. But like you see all that, and like if it's like based to the comics, I would go with the Batman. However, if you're going for performance-wise based, or like with orchestra and everything, with cinema score and cinematography and acting, The Dark Knight.
Yeah, you nailed it. And to me, we are now friends because I agree with you 100%. A lot of people that I talk to, my father included, who also shares my passion for Batman, but they say The Dark Knight is a better Batman movie. And I challenge them and I say, I would say The Dark Knight is a better movie overall. Meaning, like, here's the best example. If you take away Heath Ledger, is that the greatest Batman movie? No. Is it the best Christopher Nolan Batman movie? Maybe. Hard to say without Heath Ledger, right? So that tells me it's not necessarily the best movie. It's the best because of Heath Ledger. So you can't really put that on the pedestal, in my opinion, as a Batman movie. Like, that's not the best Batman movie because it's all about the villain. It's all about Joker. Like, he was amazing in it. I could watch that movie back to back constantly. But the Batman, Matt Reeves' Batman, is by far the best Batman movie, in my opinion. And it's, gorgeous, obviously. Matt Reeves just is an amazing cinematographer. But even the score in that is just amazing. But, like, you get to see Batman 95% of that movie. That's never been done before. And he's a detective, like a true detective, like he's supposed to be. And it's true to the comics. So, yeah, I think you're right. I think if you were to compare it to like a comic movie, comic accurate, it's like Logan. Logan's another great example, in my opinion. Right? Like, that's just a great movie, but it's also a great depiction of a comic book. Like you don't, or Deadpool, like you don't see these movies as comic accurate movies. Like The Avengers is not really comic accurate. It's entertaining. It's fun. There's a lot of shit that you blow up, but at the end of the day, it's not the best superhero movie, right? Like, to me, the best superhero movie is one that is depicted correctly from the comics. And I think the Batman nails it. So I'm stoked to see part 2 and that whole universe, the Penguin and all that. I'm jazzed up. I can't wait.
Yeah, I gotta say, speaking of Penguin, Colin Farrell was so unrecognizable as Penguin.
Oh my God. Amazing. You didn't think Danny DeVito can be beat, but he did it.
Like, for me, I will always have a fondness for Burgess Meredith's Penguin because will always be the best. That's true. Like, for example, like with the 60s, I could go on with both Julie Newmar and Eartha Kitt as Catwoman, and not to mention Frank Gorshin's Riddler.
Yeah. Classics. And, I think that campy style is just beautifully done in that era. But also when you watch it now, because, that's what it is. I mean, it's based off a comic book, like that's why I think I love Raimi's Spider-Man, Spider-Man 1, 2, 3. But like those two, those Tobey Maguire movies are great because they're campy. They're a little campy. They're a little comic booky. And that's that's what's cool about it. You watch like, Tom Holland Spider-Man, like, the last one, was it Far From Home or
It
I think?
was, yeah, I believe so. It was
Yeah.
I think it was No Way Home, I believe.
No Way Home, yeah, where all of them came together. Like that was, dude, what a movie. Great movie.
That was probably one of my favorite movies.
Yeah, dude. But then you watch that and you're like, it's a lot. It's a lot of drama. It's a lot of like a lot going on, a lot of storylines. You have to like make sure you watched all the Spider-Man to understand it, or else, you couldn't. So it's like, it's a lot going on. But then you go back and you watch the original Spider-Man movies or the original X-Men, and it's like, those aren't the best. But there's something cool about it where it's like, it's so comic booky. And I wouldn't be mad if we went back to that. I love the Joker, right? The version, Todd Phillips versions of it. And I'm excited about that. So I think there's like one aspect of that and like the Batman and Logans of the world. And then I kind of like the campy stuff. I don't know if I'm digging everything in between. And I think that's why the MCU is hurting so much, is because people are like, dude, this is enough. Like multiverse every fucking movie. We get it. Okay.
And the thing is, just to let you know, the only good villains from Phase 4, in all honesty, were William Dafoe and Agatha Harkness.
Mm-hmm. Which,
those were the only two great foes from Phase 4.
And Dafoe is from the original campiness, right? Of comic book movies. So it's like it's so funny to watch like people geek out over these movies, but then they make fun of Spider-Man 1 with Tobey Maguire. It's like, but you're rooting for the same villain in this 2023 version. Like what are you talking about? What, just because the CGI is better? You like it? It's just, but anyway.
And here's the thing. I think it's like so weird with Catherine Hahn. Like Catherine Hahn's the only one right now. We all know, spoiler alert, I'm sorry. Have you seen Loki?
I'm 2 episodes left. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So put a pin on that and then we'll talk offline about Loki.
Can't wait. Yeah. I love that show, though. That's a great show.
Yeah, I love Loki as well. And like the thing is, I'm looking forward to seeing Agatha's spinoff, and I really hope and pray that Elizabeth Olsen comes back as Wanda.
Mm-hmm. Another great villain. Fantastic. She was great in Doctor Strange. Love that.
Yeah, I loved her so much. I'm like, please give her back some happiness or something like that.
I know. She did an interview, though, the other day on the red carpet or something. She was like, yeah, I don't have any plans to revive the character. If they have something cool, great. If not, And I'm like, I kind of get where she's coming from, because she's such a badass where it's like, you got to be picky about that stuff. Like Hugh Jackman was very picky about it. So the fact that he's coming back, I don't even know, 15 years later or something, 10 years later in Deadpool 3, I think that's kind of a cool thing to do. Is these characters are so iconic and so great at what they do. You got to be very picky when it comes to it. So,
and speaking of picky, I was excited when I saw Professor X Patrick Stewart roll in Multiverse Madness. And spoiler alert, I saw it on the internet. Kelsey Grammer as Beast took me by surprise. I never thought I would see him again. And
dude, he played the Beast perfectly. I would love to see like a solo movie of that. You know what I mean? But they definitely did X-Men dirty back in the day. So I hope Deadpool 3 will kind of rectify the.
And not to mention, Hughes wearing the Wolverine costume.
So sick. Yeah, can't wait.
That's we're gonna have to. I might have to have you back on when Deadpool 3 comes out, and we'll talk about it.
Yeah, dude, I'll geek out about that for sure. Absolutely.
Alrighty, so let's get back to our conversation. So let's talk about social media. So what are your favorite social media platforms to hang out, or where would you recommend podcasters utilize them?
Right now I love YouTube Shorts. I think that's very underrated. But I'm a big fan of Instagram. Only because, TikTok, to me, the easy answer is TikTok. That's the easy answer. But unfortunately, I just don't know if as a podcaster, that is, if we're just talking about that, I don't know if TikTok is the best, because there's no tools currently that will push your audience to listen to your episodes. The one thing that Instagram, I think, compared to any other platform, especially if we're talking vertical, Instagram is just a powerhouse when it comes to customization of your stories, your reels. You can leave a link to a podcast episode. So like if you were to cut this episode up and into 1 minute vertical clip, you can leave a link in your stories, and that link will bring the follower right to this podcast episode. TikTok, you can't do that. You'll get people to watch, and I think you can go viral easier on TikTok. I think it's a more engaging platform. I think overall it's a better platform to be on. But in terms of like growing a following, monetization, Instagram is just there still because you got Instagram that you can also share everything on Facebook automatically without even pushing a button. You could just set it up automatically. So now you're engaging with those Facebook followers. So I just think that's something that TikTok doesn't have. So unless you already have a huge following on TikTok, I think Instagram is still the Mac Daddy. There's just a lot more customization, a lot more things you could do to keep your audience more engaged. TikTok to me is like, that's the typical, Gen Z, maybe millennial platform where you just want to aimlessly scroll and you want to laugh. You want to see authentic content. You want to see real content. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's fantastic. I think it's just a better platform. But from a business standpoint, I don't know. I think Instagram's the way to go. So
Awesome. So we got to start winding down our conversation. So why should my audience check out the Berardo podcast?
I think you're going to get some value out of it, whether you want to learn how to podcast, you want to learn about content, maybe you want to get better at your overall mental and physical health. I dip into so many different topics on a weekly and monthly basis that I think you'll like at least one episode. And I think if you like one episode, I might hook you in for multiple. So just, give it a shot. Listen to a couple. You can also see it on YouTube. I like to keep my YouTube videos pretty engaging, so it's not so boring when you watch the whole thing. But I think you'll get value out of it. That's why you should listen.
Also, so where can they listen to it? What podcasts, and then also not to mention your social media handles.
Yeah, so you can find me everywhere at the Berardo, the Berardo, and my website's theberardo.com. You can find me on YouTube at the Berardo. So I'm everywhere: YouTube, Apple, iHeart, Amazon Music, Spotify, you name it. I'm on all those platforms. So check it out there.
Alrighty, guys. If you missed an episode of the Jake's Take with Jacob Elyachar podcast, visit our channels on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Podchaser, Spotify, and Spreaker. Jake's Take with Jacob Elyachar, JACOB ELYACHAR. Are you on social media? Because I'm on social media too. Facebook, Instagram, Threads, TikTok, and YouTube. Jacob Elyachar, JACOB ELYACHAR. And guys, check out jakes-shake.com, the blog that started all. For more articles, my take on new music, what went on with Masked Singer Season 10, what's going on with America's Got Talent Fantasy League. So don't miss, go to jakes-shake.com. Tony, I'm so grateful that you came onto the podcast. I'm so grateful to have you as a guest.
This was fun. Thank you for having me, Jake. Appreciate it. Let's do it again.
Absolutely. And guys, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, have a great one, everybody. Goodbye.